When it comes to Putin, a lot of people either love him or hate him. But regardless of this, Russia has a lot of resources such as oil and most importantly, gas, which are needed to fuel certain industries and housing during colder weather. Every developed nation needs this resource, and that includes European nations. However, unlike its diversified oil income, Europe gets a lot of its gas, unfortunate as it sounds, from Russia. In total, 40% of Europe's natural gas comes from Russia to be used in all fields, such as power plants, residential areas, and other factories. However, the gas dependency also varies by country. Germany imports 60% of its gas from Russia, while Finland and the Baltic states completely get all of their gas from Tsar Putin.
That was too easy. Hey, this isn't water. This is gas.
But this most certainly doesn't go without resistance. For years, the European Union has been looking for ways to diversify its gas sources and reduce their consumption from Russia.
The EU has unveiled a new energy strategy it says will help it avoid possible shortages arising from gas disputes between Russia and Ukraine. Europe imports more than 60% of its gas, most of it from Russia. Brussels has long recognised the need to diversify sources after some EU countries suffered supply cuts during price rows between Moscow and Kiev.
There are other nations that transport gas to Europe. Norway is the third largest exporter of gas in the world, exporting 227 million cubic meters in 2018 and earning 442 billion Norwegian kronas. 25% of the European Union's gas sources come from Norway, and most of it goes to other Nordic nations and parts of Western Europe. But then again, this is only a quarter of the delivery. Algeria is another nation that has pipelines leading into Europe, mostly the Iberian Peninsula, but that number is also increasing. Between 2017 and 2023, it is believed that 391 to 505 billion cubic meters of natural gas will be exported to Europe. And by 2040, it is believed that the gas trade would have increased by 20%. Another big project that the European Union is aiming at is to find alternative sources in a former Soviet republic by the name of Azerbaijan. The Ani family may be corrupt, but they treat Western politicians like their own children. Do you know why? Well, the Caspian has a lot of gas, and I mean a lot of it. So much so that it could bring up 10% of the European Union's gas supply, which would basically decrease Russia's dependence even more. So in general, the European Union wants to decrease its gas dependency on Russia. Azerbaijan needs a wealthy buyer. It's a perfect match. The pipeline will start in the Caspian Sea and then go through Georgia, Turkey, Greece, and all the way to Italy, which will serve as a gateway to Europe. Construction actually towards Europe started in 2018 and it's continuing on. So you're probably wondering, what does Putin think about this? Well, he is very unhappy and he is trying to stop this pipeline to make sure Europe depends on Russian gas. For starters, back in 2014, he called up his friend in Italy, Beppe Grillo, a member of a populist party called the Five Stars. They used to have some retarded philosophy, but they're pretty much better now. Back then, he even said this:
We want to make this pipe in Puglia rather than any other place. We will bring the army if necessary.
Well, that was then, and this is now. Let's see how they reacted in 2018. And yet, even now, two powers are still trying to stop it. In Russia, Alexander Golvin, a special envoy to Caspian issues, stated that a major gas pipeline would pose a serious and dangerous risk to the prosperity of the entire region. According to the Russian Natural Resource Ministry, any gas or oil pipelines across the floor of the Caspian Sea would be environmentally unacceptable. Russia has also taken the legal position that a potential pipeline project, regardless of the route it takes on the seabed, would require the consent of all 5 Caspian littoral states in order to proceed. Iran has also shown opposition to the pipeline, pointing out that treaties signed by Iran and the Soviet Union in 1921 and 1940 are still in force, and that any action taken without the consent of all littoral states would be illegal. Well, it looks like someone isn't happy about their business running amok. However, as you know, the European Union is more interested in reducing its gas dependency on Russia, and the beginning of the pipeline is a clear sign that they're going ahead with it. Recently, Russia stated that it expressed its disappointment as it seems to have been adopted without taking into account the internationally accepted legal and geopolitical situation in the Caspian Basin.
It holds an estimated 50 billion barrels of oil and nearly 8.4 trillion cubic meters of gas reserves, and is the source of 80 to 90% of the world's caviar. Classifying the Caspian as a sea or a lake has been at the center of the decades-long negotiations. Defining it as a lake would mean equal division among 5 countries, whereas defining it as a sea requires splitting it in proportion to each nation's share of coastline according to the International Maritime Law. The 5 nations signed the Convention on the Legal Status of the Caspian Sea on August 12, 2018 to settle several disputes. The pact takes both approaches in a compromise, treating the surface as international waters and dividing the seabed into territorial zones. It forbids any power without a Caspian shoreline to set up a military presence. The convention might open a path for security and economic cooperation among countries, such as underwater pipeline projects to bring Central Asia's energy to the European market. Iranian President Hassan Rouhani says that dividing the seabed mineral wealth would require additional agreements.
But if Europe wants to completely diversify its gas supply, it needs to add one other factor to its list, and that is LNG, or liquefied natural gas. This is a procedure where the temperature of the gas is lowered to negative 161 degrees Celsius, that's about negative 257.8 degrees Fahrenheit. This is the point where the gas becomes liquid and you can then store it in barrels where they will be shipped overseas. Once it has reached the destination, they will reheat it till it becomes gas again. From there on, it'll be transported everywhere it needs to go. Qatar is the world's largest gas supplier, but they're still not open to many agreements, and many have actually criticized doing business with the entire country in general. But that's not the only region in the world willing to export natural gas. Asia is currently a large market with a high demand for natural gas, and shipping lanes with lots of gas are coming from North America to the giant continent. The US produced 25.3 trillion cubic feet of marketed natural gas with an average value head of $2.66 per thousand cubic feet for a total of $67.3 billion in 2012. In 2015, that number increased to 28.8 trillion cubic feet. As a very large producer, it became a potential buyer, and Trump said the following thing at the most recent NATO summit.
Germany is totally controlled by Russia because they were getting from 60 to 70% of their energy from Russia and a new pipeline. And you tell me if that's appropriate, because I think it's not, and I think it's a very bad thing for NATO.
Europe has definitely seen an urge to build more LNG terminals across the continent, and new partners could quickly speed up that construction. Now, the US isn't the only one nation in North America. There is another nation that can help very much. That country, as you've seen by the title, is Canada. Canada is the 4th largest producer of natural gas in the world, and with proven reserves of 58.2 trillion cubic feet. However, it exports very little to Europe at the moment. Yet, Canada aspires to become an emerging energy superpower, and finding new markets as well as investors has become a leading priority. Consequently, it formed a pan-European oil sands team to lobby the European Union. This would allow state-owned firms to invest tens of billions in tar sand developments. As early as 2014, when Russia annexed Crimea and Europe started more desperately looking for other suppliers, former Prime Minister Stephen Harper met with European leaders in order to reban the country as a gas producer. This will also make import free with the CETA agreement that was signed in 2016. At the moment, Canada has 16 LNG terminals, 13 of which are on the west coast, which will go to the Asian partners such as Japan or China, while 3 are on the east coast, one of which has been marketed for Europe. Now look, this agreement will not completely replace Russia altogether, but it will serve well in augmenting Europe's suppliers from Azerbaijan, Algeria, and the US to help Europe significantly decrease its gas dependency on Russia. The best part of these proposals is that they're already working. The Nord Stream 2, the new pipeline between Russia and Germany that goes to the Baltic Sea, has been halted. Various leaders from both the US and the European Union have criticized the pipeline and even calling for its dismantlement. Even populist figures such as Hungary's Viktor Orban have questioned the project altogether. In October 2017, the Danish parliament even passed legislation which forbid the construction of the Nord Stream 2 in Danish waters. Even more recently, France brought up its support for a European Commission proposal to bring Nord 2 and other third country pipelines under EU regulations. This would mean that Nord Stream 2 would not be owned or operated by the same company that produces the gas. Naturally, Europe deserves better for its continent than solely relying on Russian gas, and this large shift towards multiple gas sources would be a good way of severing Russia's upper hand in any tense crisis. Even the Russians are sticking up their "I don't care" as of now nose. They're also looking for other buyers as well.
I'm from Rouhani. Could you please clarify about the South Stream? This news was a bit unexpected. What's going to happen with the project? Are you going to suspend it? Are you going to make it a bilateral project between Russia and Turkey? What are the options? And a second short question about the nuclear power plant. What's the delay in this implementation of this project? And amid this, how is it going to impact the complicated economic situation?
Well, as far as South Stream is concerned, we believe that the European Commission's attitude has not been constructive. It has not been helpful in implementing this project. Moreover, we actually see it trying to create impediments and obstruct the implementation of this project. Well, if Europe does not want this project to be implemented, then we will not implement this project. We will redirect our energy resources to other regions of the world, in part through implementing our liquefied natural gas projects and speeding them up. We will just sell our energy resources to other markets, and Europe will not receive them in the necessary amounts. We believe this would be contrary to Europe's economic interests. This would negatively affect our economic cooperation, but that is the choice on the part of our European friends. It is their own choice. They are the buyers, it is up to them, but Russia cannot start constructing a pipeline so long as we have not received Bulgaria's authorization for constructing something in its exclusive economic zone. We cannot, it would be ridiculous for us to invest hundreds of millions of dollars in constructing a project, bringing it to Bulgaria's borders and having to drop it from there on.